Montreal is widely considered the most haunted city in all of Canada, and there's a reason for that. Layers upon layers upon layers of history, of course.
Today's story, however, is a little different from your normal, everyday haunting. The city is generally considered to be a landmark for UFO sightings and paranormal activity.
There are more sightings of UFOs over Quebec than in any other Canadian province.
I want you to go back to the time of your vacation in Montreal.
It was approximately 112 miles from Montreal. We were driving from Niagara Falls through Canada.
September 19, 1961 has the first really dramatic and well-publicized case of alien abduction.
The more that you learn about it, the more incredible it becomes.
As the story goes, on September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving home from their honeymoon in Montreal. As they drove through New Hampshire's White Mountains, they said they were followed by what felt like a spotlight.
It was late at night. Betty sees this unusual light that seems to be maneuvering.
This light stopped in midair directly in front of us. The car motor stalled, and at that point, I realized that they undoubtedly planned to take us on board.
And then the next thing is that they're 35 miles down the road and they have no idea how they got that far down the road. It turns out they were missing 2 hours.
My wife decided, well, we should notify someone, and we thought of notifying of the military base located in this area.
A radar had detected something unidentified and had reported it through channels inside the Air Force.
They had tracked an unidentified craft at 2:14 a.m., just about the time we estimate that the UFO left.
This case did get a lot of behind-the-scenes attention from some very interesting scientists. They wanted to know what happened to Betty and Barney Hill.
They developed a series of nightmares, and as a result of that, ufologists told them you should be regressed hypnotically to try to see if you remember more. And he played the tapes for us. They are terrifying.
Captain, what is he? All right, that's all.
Something very traumatic had happened to them.
We're gathered together tonight to hear an extraordinary story. One of the most fascinating stories in the history of man. Barney and Betty Hill are two of many Americans who claim to have seen an unidentified flying object, and two of perhaps 100 who claim to have been aboard a flying saucer.
It's one thing to say that you've seen a UFO. It's quite another to say that you've been on board one.
I think everyone in the country has heard about Betty and Barney Hill.
The Hills encounter becomes the first widely publicized credible report of alien abduction in history.
They've been called the Adam and Eve of alien abductees. They set the standard. Their case is the one that really started it all. The prototype for what has become all too familiar throughout the years for fans of science, science fiction, and otherworldly encounters.
The Hill case has become a classic example of alleged extraterrestrial contact with human beings because it contains elements which are still the subject of heated debate among UFO investigators all over the world.
The Betty and Barney Hill case is like Area 51 in the legend of aliens, as high as that. Once you have smoked the gateway drug of Area 51, this guy's waiting behind the middle school to give you something a little harder that will get you addicted for life.
It's really sort of this historical event in history.
Those images of poking, prodding, gray creatures, Betty and Barney brought them to the forefront.
Do you think that E.T. would look the way that E.T. looks without Betty and Barney Hill?
No.
In New Hampshire, where this took place, there's actually a sign, an official historical sign.
Whether you believe this happened or not, there's no denying that it is part of pop culture. Thus, it is historically significant.
It was just an ordinary day in America. Betty, a social worker, and Barney, a U.S. postal employee, were driving home after their honeymoon in Niagara Falls. A trip they would never forget.
Both were active in the civil rights movement, worked with the NAACP. Their status as an interracial couple, not exactly an easy one in those times. They were well-educated and well-regarded, two affable, intelligent people who just had needed a break. Barney decided a trip through Montreal and Niagara Falls was what the doctor ordered. They didn't have a ton of dough to their name, but they were going to make the best of it. They didn't forget their dog, however, Delcy the Dachshund, who they just adopted 6 weeks prior to go take the vacation as well.
Betty and Barney had a wonderful time in Niagara Falls. They spent the following afternoon in Montreal. They thought about spending the night downtown, but they heard that there was a hurricane whirling up the coast.
September 19, 1961, my husband Barney and I were in Montreal. We heard a weather report that a hurricane was coming up the coast and probably would hit our hometown Portsmouth. So we decided to return to Portsmouth, get there before the hurricane did.
That journey from Montreal to Portsmouth, New Hampshire should have been around 5 hours. Now on the road home, and unbeknownst to them, this sudden change of plans would change their lives forever.
They were on their honeymoon?
Yeah, they were on their way home from their honeymoon.
Yeah, I had no idea about that part of it.
Yeah, I had no clue.
So we went to restrooms and we stopped in Colorado and got a gas for the car.
When we, traveling south on Route 3, arrived in an area called Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty called my attention to an object or a star that she had been watching.
I suddenly saw a new star in the sky. And as I watched it, it became bigger and brighter. So we stopped the car together to get a good look at this.
Betty had never seen a satellite before, so Betty wondered, could this be a satellite? But then she thought, no, it's not behaving like a satellite.
She then passed the binoculars to me and said, well, you must really look at the satellite because it's not behaving as we would expect.
It's clear at this point this was not a satellite. It does a circle. It seems to fly away to the west and then come back directly towards them.
Barney is coming up with the other explanations. Maybe it's a passenger jet.
At first, Barney suspected the object to be a commercial plane en route to Montreal.
And surprisingly, this began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed. Well, this caused me to become quite alarmed. I felt uncomfortable to see this. So I returned to the car, and so did she. We drove down the highway.
Privately, he knew that this was unusual, but he said to Betty, don't even think about that, and let's get home.
Up until now, the sighting had been at quite a distance, but now that they've driven down the road several miles, they look up, and it's still there.
As they continue driving south, Betty notices the aircraft appears to be stalking them.
It knows that we're here. They're thinking this has a particular interest in us. There's no other cars on the highway, and this light is getting brighter and it's getting closer.
As they looked at it, it flew in a zigzag pattern, and then it appeared to bounce back and forth in the sky like a ping pong ball. Betty said to Barney, it's coming closer, Barney.
Barney starts to panic.
Well, from this point, I was getting quite frightened. They could obviously see us on the ground with the lights of the car on. I thought they were playing a game with us out there.
It followed us for approximately 30 miles, and then in an area called Indian Head, it left the top of the mountain, came out over the highway, and stopped mid-air on the highway right in front of us.
And it was at this point that the disc-shaped craft started hovering silently.
On each end, two fin-like wings extended each side with a red light, creating a W shape with the flatter disc in the center. In the center, a row of windows that he could actually see into lay across the narrow side of the disc. And what he saw was even more bizarre. I'm going to quote Barney for what happened next. Quote, I shook my head and turned away and looked back and said, oh God, it's there. What is this thing?
Barney freaks the fuck out. He jumps back in the car. He's like, Betty, we gotta go. They're gonna get us.
He ran back to the car. He went speeding down the highway to avoid capture.
And as he began to take off in the car, the ship once again swooped overhead, this time directly above the vehicle.
Betty rolls down the window and stuck her head out to look at the craft. Betty's not giving up on the craft. She seemed to be more interested in it than Barney is at this point. Barney just seemed scared.
Attempting to lose whatever was with them, Barney then made a random turn off of Route 3 onto a smaller road. Soon, the car began to vibrate with a rhythmic buzzing tone.
She starts hearing this rhythmic sequence of buzzing and beeping sounds. And apparently while they're hearing these beeping noises, Betty and Barney Hill start feeling a strange tingling sensation passing through their bodies.
There's something shifting in the car.
I don't know.
Uh-oh.
How strange.
They start coming back to their senses and start coming back to reality, and they realize that they somehow traveled 35 miles south, and they really had no memory of how they had gotten there or what had just happened in the prior 2 hours.
It was at this moment, the beeping, when your memory returned. It's a time previous to this that you can't remember.
Yes, Dr. Simon, that's right.
I see.
In my experience working with these cases is that partly it's the subconscious mind blocking some of these memories and then bubbling up to the surface. And partly it could be the alien beings are programming people not to remember.
When they finally arrived back home, they believed they made it home in time, just after 3 a.m. as expected, but were more than surprised to see the sun begin to rise as they did make it home.
About the clock, you said you glanced up at the clock as you were undressing.
I saw that it was 5 after 5. Didn't register. I don't think Barney realized it either. Neither one of us realized till months later that it was that late.
That was all the Hills could remember about the incident when they finally arrived home, but they both had an uneasy feeling that there was something more.
They each went inside, leaving their personal things on the porch, and took a shower before going to bed, determined to worry about it in the morning after a stressful and scary ride home.
Wasn't that strange, Barney? Whatever it was.
Betty, I don't want to talk to anybody about last night, all right?
All right.
If you want to talk about it, we can just talk about it to ourselves.
The next morning, after they awoke, they realized things were a little off.
Betty and Barney noticed that the clocks on their walls in their home were no longer working, and they noticed that none of their watches were working either.
And that was just really the first of the sort of odd things they started noticing. The next thing Barney noticed was that the strap to his binoculars was torn, and he had no idea how that had happened. He also noticed that a pair of his nicest dress shoes somehow got all scraped up. Betty picks up her clothes that she wore the night before, and as she was putting her dress away in her closet, she noticed that it was torn at the hem, zipper, and lining. And she said there was even a pinkish powder on her dress as well.
She also realized that she was no longer wearing her blue earrings that she was wearing the night before.
So those were missing as well. And to top it all off, when Betty and Barney went back out to their vehicle, they noticed that there was multiple shiny concentric circles on the trunk of their car, which had obviously not been there the prior day.
And there were these strange, shiny spots on the back of the car. I finally got Barney to come out and look at them.
Barney refused to speak about the craft initially, and proposed rather they both go into separate rooms, and each of them draw the craft before they discuss it, as he was convinced that maybe they hallucinated, and if they both drew different things, then this would put his mind at ease.
Is this the drawing that's like popular? The one that's like in every story about them?
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately for him, they were both incredibly similar. It's at this point that Barney actually wanted to drop the entire thing. He wanted to keep the whole thing to themselves and never to speak of it again, worrying it would ruin their reputations. This was the 60s, and again, their relationship had already brought tensions to their lives, and whatever had happened that night before had clearly shaken him. But Betty fully disagreed and felt like she needed to reach out to someone.
So by the afternoon of that day, after they've been making all these discoveries, Betty decides to call her sister Janet.
I was 13 years old and I had arrived home from school in the afternoon. My mother was on the phone with my Aunt Betty, and I heard my mother's side of the conversation. When my mother hung up the phone, she told me that Betty and Barney had seen a flying saucer up close. I was in shock. I thought this was very, very strange.
It was suggested to Betty and Barney Hill that they call the local Air Force base about their encounter. And here is the official U.S. Air Force report. Their testimony of the sighting is recorded. It's regarded as a strange incident. The subject of the report is unidentified flying object. The report states that radar did indeed pick up an unidentified flying object that night.
The Air Force has confirmed that a UFO was tracked on radar in the vicinity of New Hampshire's White Mountains on the night of the Hill's abduction.
It also states that while there are some inconsistencies in the story, Barney Hill's, quote, honesty and seriousness appear to be valid. But there was no official final conclusion as to what they had seen that night.
Major Henderson's conclusion was revised 3 times after his initial conclusion that they had simply misidentified Jupiter, from an optical illusion to a temperature inversion, with the final conclusion being insufficient data.
About 6 weeks later, Barney and I had gone out in the evening, and when we came home, on the kitchen table was a pile of dried leaves.
Piled onto their kitchen table.
What?
Naturally, they checked the doors, but they were all locked and unharmed.
And when I went to clean up the pile of dried leaves, there was my blue earrings I was wearing that night.
There's a fucking pile of leaves and an earring, like the aliens came in like, uh-oh, we forgot to return the earring.
That
Quick,
is such a
pile it under the
that is
leaves.
such a
They'll never know.
strange detail.
Months passed, but life was not the same for the Hills. Barney suffered recurring headaches. They were tense, upset, couldn't sleep.
After the alleged abduction, for a time being, Betty and Barney tried to keep it quiet. After a while, they shared their experience with people at church. As much as they tried to keep it quiet, a reporter for the Boston Traveler tracked down the story and published it a few years later. And at that time, they really became internationally known.
A Boston reporter picked up their story, and readers went crazy to learn more.
And it ran for 5 days on the front pages of the Boston newspaper. I went on TV. I was questioned by F. Lee Bailey and had lie detector testing. And I had very, very high ratings for honesty and truthfulness.
Hello, which one have I got on the line, or have I got your both?
You have us both on.
Oh, how wonderful. Hello, that's you, Barney?
Yes, that's correct.
And Betty, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Now, as I understand it, we have to go back to 1961 to start this whole incident, don't we?
Yes, that's right. September 19th, 1961.
We remember seeing the men in the road, but we couldn't get down them. And so we would go back there about once a month, thinking if we could find the spot where we saw the men in the road, we could remember what happened. And we were beginning to get little memories back, but nothing too shocking. And then Barney's health failed.
Barney ended up taking a leave of absence from work. He had developed high blood pressure, bleeding ulcers, post-traumatic stress disorder, wasn't able to sleep. He was very traumatized by all of this.
And he wasn't responding to medication, so his doctor sent him to a psychiatrist. So he referred us to Dr. Benjamin Simon in Boston.
Dr. Simon interviewed Betty and Barney separately and together, and then he began 6 months of separate hypnosis sessions.
Dr. Simon uses a then revolutionary technique known as hypnotic regression, a process by which Betty and Barney are put under a trance and then are encouraged to recall memories that are not available to the conscious mind. In sessions lasting over 6 months, Dr. Simon uncovers shocking facts about the first ever modern account of an alien abduction.
And then I pulled over to the side of the road, and I looked toward the sky. It looks like a big pancake. I drive, and Betty is still looking, and she said, Barney, they're still following us. What do they want?
Under hypnosis, Barney remembered that the reason why his binocular strap was torn was because when he ran away from the approaching UFO and got back into the car, he had torn it.
Audio recordings of hypnosis sessions reveal the frightening moment when Betty and Barney are taken.
I believe This is a flying saucer. I can see it tilted toward me.
I don't know where we are. I don't even know how we got here.
They took me and carried me up this ramp. God, I'm scared.
They're taking me up to the object. Now, I don't want to go on it. I don't want it. I don't know what's going to happen if I go on it. I don't want to go. I go up the ramp. Should I go inside?
They're saying to Betty, there's nothing to be afraid of. We only need to do a few simple tests. You won't be harmed. And then you'll very quickly be on your way. She kicks the one who is beside her, and this tears the hem on her dress down. They regain control of her, and she is taken into an examining room on the craft.
That's where Betty meets someone she calls the Examiner.
Betty also displayed a considerable amount of emotional distress during her capture. In fact, it was so bad that Dr. Simon had to end one of the hypnosis sessions early because Betty was screaming in pain.
Daddy, take my pain. My pain. And I'm crying, and I tell her it's hurting,
Dr. Simon was astounded by Betty's hypnotic recall of the alleged abduction, mainly because Barney told him essentially the same incredible story in a separate hypnotic interview.
One of the men examined his spine with a tool and began counting his vertebrae. Barney also stated that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language that he had trouble understanding. Now what's interesting is that they also were asked to sketch out the beings, and it definitely looks exactly like what we call gray aliens.
The leader, I would say, was my height, a little taller than I am, and I'm 5 foot. They all had dark uniforms. I shouldn't say uniform. All had a one-piece dark clothing on. They were bald, no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and no ear, we could say. Very large eyes, very small, flat nose, thin slit for mouth.
This was kind of the first time that we'd ever seen quote-unquote gray alien actually looked like. It was all based upon Betty and Barney Hill's recollection of what they looked like.
But after the experiments, or whatever they were, things became surprisingly more congenial between Betty and her captors. He also showed her a map of where they traveled in the galaxy, which Betty recounted.
Among the most intriguing and notable details gleaned from the sessions was Betty's hand-drawn star map. The sessions enabled her to recall the image in such great detail that she was able to draw it on a piece of paper.
There it is.
This is the map you drew.
Yep.
This is amazing, because how much did you know about astronomy?
Not a thing.
The image was shown to numerous astronomers with the hope that one of them would be able to identify the constellation. Unfortunately, no one could.
Astronomers became fascinated, for what if the map corresponded to a pattern of real stars from an alien viewpoint? Astronomers reasoned that the majority of star systems likely to have life-supporting planets were located in the obscure southern constellation of Reticulum. Yet 3 stars in the cluster were unknown until 1969. No astronomer on Earth knew their position in 1963. But that same year, Betty Hill drew a map which contained these undiscovered stars. Astronomers at Ohio State University requested a computer to put them in their correct position out beyond the incredible double star system of Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2. 220 trillion miles, 37 light years away from Earth, looking toward our sun. And the computer duplicated with virtually no variation the now famous map of Betty Hill.
Now, if you know anything about alleged alien species, the grays allegedly come from the star system Zeta Reticuli.
Noted astronomers Carl Sagan and Stephen Soter believed the similarities between Betty's star map and Zeta Reticuli to be nothing more than a random alignment of chance points.
But after all of these hypnotic sessions were over and seemingly all this was behind them, Betty and Barney Hill went back to living their regular lives.
When Barney Hill heard the playback of the tapes, he said, "I felt so overwhelmed and relieved. Parts of my life that were missing had been added to again. Parts of my life were being put back together."
Their story and the information that they recalled in those hypnosis sessions were eventually released in this big long report. And from there, a ton of books were written, endless films and movies and TV shows as a result of this. There was just a ton of media that came out of the Betty and Barney Hill story.
There's a James Earl Jones version of this that exists. Are you serious? I'm telling you, there is. I've seen it.
The UFO Incident, 1975.
75? That's
I can click
pre-Vader.
on it.
The Hills' story was eventually made into a 1975 TV movie starring James Earl Jones and Estelle Parsons, titled, ironically, The UFO Incident, which Betty Hill and Dr. Simon both did press for upon its release. By that point, Barney had died of a cerebral hemorrhage in 1969, at the young age of 46. Betty would go on to become a fixture in the UFO circuit and always enjoyed telling her tale to those who would listen. Those who considered her one of the originators of the alien abduction legend. She passed away in 2004 at the age of 84.
There's a lot of controversy surrounding this event. Regardless of what did or did not happen that night, their story is one that has become a big part of UFO lore.
According to a Gallup poll taken in 1966, only 7% of Americans thought that UFOs had otherworldly origins. This is contrasted with a public opinion laboratory poll taken only 20 years later, where 43% of respondents said that they thought UFOs were vehicles used by extraterrestrial space travelers.
This case, after all, is the ground zero of the alien abduction phenomenon. If you were a skeptic, you would say this is the case that led to lots of copycats. And if you're a believer, you'd say this is the case that encouraged other people to speak out because they felt that maybe they weren't alone with this after all.
Yes. Something clearly happened to them. Where like a thing happened, couldn't tell you what it was.
A lot of details. I'm just like, if they made this up, that's a lot of really specific detail.
No, that's the thing, you need these details. They were like, you think they're in the car and they're like, okay, I'm gonna tear the dress. We'll throw a stain on there. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna buff the exterior of our car. I'm gonna ruin our car.
But who's to say they didn't have that damage from the day before, the day prior?
Do you think that in the whole of their trip of Montreal, she's walking around with a ripped, stained dress?
What if in Montreal, maybe something else did happen? Maybe they were part of a crime. Maybe they perpetrated something. That was the evidence from the crime that they committed, and they blamed it on aliens.
Why are you so gung-ho on making these people horrible human beings?
It's exciting that way.
And aliens aren't exciting?
I'll even read you a little bit of the analysis done by Matthew Moniz, who is a scientific analysis director, and he analyzed the dress sample from Betty. He said that the dress showed a form of degradation that is consistent with high UV exposure. Now, what's interesting about this pink powder, too, and this has been actually investigated and tested by 5 different laboratories, and they've determined that the actual powder, whatever the substance is not of organic origin. You guys will have to let us know what you think about the Betty and Barney Hill story. Do you believe it or do you not? I don't fucking know. That's my answer. Right? I don't fucking know, and I don't think any of us will ever know whether or not that story is true.
I have no doubt that maybe something bad happened to them, but is that something because of aliens? That's where it gets a little hokey for me.
Oh, I'm really torn. I don't feel that I have enough evidence to say absolutely yes, but I also don't feel like I have enough reason to say absolutely no. I don't know. I don't want to say yes or no, Matt.
Me neither. It's a really tricky, and this happens all the time with conspiracy stuff. You get your reasons for, you have your reasons against, and ultimately sometimes it just comes down to what you want to believe.
Who knows?
The only thing, we will never have objective truth about what happened in this scenario. We just can't. It's impossible. The fact that they found their piece is what, obviously the
all
most
that really
important.
matters, yeah.
What do you think? Were the Hills really abducted, or was it all made up?
Whatever the reality is, the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill captured the nation, inspired countless movies and books, both nonfiction and fiction, and for better or for worse had a huge impact on science fiction and UFO research.
May the Hills always be remembered for the courage and bravery they displayed in the face of adversity. Not only were they true pioneers in the civil rights movement, they served an integral role in bringing much-needed legitimacy to the field of UFO research. May their lives forever serve as a reminder to always keep an open heart and an open mind, and may they rest in peace.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wrestling with Conspiracies. So here's how I want to start this off, because I have a couple of thoughts that I'm going to bring up myself. But my main question to you guys, seeing what we just saw, I'm pretty sure isn't the only thing y'all have seen. Andrew, we were discussing during lunch earlier today. He's seen various videos. Some of them I have seen as well. Some of them I haven't seen. You know, we each go on and do our own thing and look at what we want to look at. But just focusing on this video by itself, would you say that you believe their story or not? Do you find it credible?
I would say I do. I mean, it sounds similar to other stories. Most of these happen when people are out on the road at night. So
in unpopulated areas.
yeah, yeah.
I would go ahead.
No, I say yeah, I could believe it.
I would say I believe it as well for many different reasons, but there's also some other stuff that I know about this case where people seem to think they got ideas from movies and from different articles that they have read weeks before they went on their honeymoon. One of the things that happened, I believe they said it was 3 weeks before they went on their honeymoon, is Betty Hill ended up going to a movie theater and watching a movie about aliens a couple of weeks before. She was very much an enthusiast, very interested in the subject, as many people are. So some people seem to bring up that argument that they don't believe this story because of different articles and movies she had watched and kind of leading her own, like we do, investigation and looking up things. Of course, it was a lot more difficult back then because for us, it's easy. We just sit here, we go to YouTube or we search whatever we want to search, and it's easily accessible to us. But I would believe that it wasn't as easily accessible for them back in the day. Andrew, I know Johnny said it seemed believable to him. What do you think about this whole video we just watched?
I believe it.
Yeah, the one of the things I wanted to bring up because of
And
who
it's not
they
that,
are.
and it's not that they're the only. It's just that they're the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's stories that happening still today.
And even with everything that's coming out with the UAPs and the government and stuff that they've been hiding. In fact, right before we went live, I had about 20, 30 minutes after finished setting things up and pulling up the YouTube videos. I saw that they were holding a live conference where they had Dr. Fravor, who is one of the ones who has information that he could release. I wish I could have stayed because they were in court and they were speaking about what they knew, releasing more information about what they knew, but on record, obviously. because you're in court, so everything is on record. So I wish I could have stayed on there and watched a little bit more, but had to come here and prep some things. But the reason I would say it's most believable to me, their story, is like they referenced at the beginning of the video. At the time when this happened, it was very much still a touchy subject where a white woman being with a black man, they would still be persecuted and kind of singled out for their relationship. It wasn't as accepted back then as it is now. So they had that working against them. And then you're going to bring up a story about what happened to you, about being abducted. Talk about both ends of worst case scenario that you could find yourself in. That is why I find it believable, is because why would they put themselves in that situation when they already have enough trouble with them just being a couple because she was white and he was black? I don't know how y'all feel about that. And I also have a list of other alien abduction claimants, which I wanted to bring up. Andrew, I told Andrew about one of them earlier, so I'm going to single him out here in a bit. But it's Antonio Villaboas, Alan Godfrey, Betty and Barney Hill on the list, Calvin Parker, David Lee Hart, and Jane Volsky. The incident at Ickley Moor, which they didn't name the officer, but an officer claimed that he was abducted by aliens. Pierre Fortunato Sanfretta, Riley Martin, Robert Taylor.
I know Riley Martin.
I knew that one would strike a chord with you, and I'll say it why here in a second.
Yeah.
Travis Walton, Whitley Stryber, and Stan Romanek. The reason Riley Martin sounded familiar to Johnny is because he hosts the Riley Martin Show on Sirius XM radio channel Howard 101.
Yeah, he was a whackpecker.
Yeah. And they all had their fair share of incidents, and obviously they find themselves in many different scenarios. And there's something that Zach brought up that I'm going to bring up here in a bit. The one I want to focus on first is Antonio Villaboas. At the time of his alleged abduction, Antonio Villaboas was a 23-year-old Brazilian farmer who was working at night to avoid the hot temperatures of the day. On October 15, 1957, he was plowing fields near San Francisco de Sales when he saw what he described as a red star in the night sky. According to his story, the star approached his position, growing in size until it became recognizable as a roughly circular or egg-shaped aerial craft, with a red light at its front and a rotating cupola on top. The craft began descending to land in the field, extending 3 legs as it did so. At that point, Boaz decided to run from the scene. According to Boaz, he first attempted to leave the scene on his tractor, but when its lights and engine died after traveling only a short distance, he decided to continue on foot. However, he was seized by a 5-foot-tall humanoid who was wearing gray coveralls and a helmet. Its eyes were small and blue, and instead of speech, it made noises like barks or yelps. 3 similar beings then joined the first in subduing Boas, and they dragged him inside their craft. Now, once he was inside the craft, it took about 30 minutes roughly before where it got a little bit weird. Weirder than it already is, okay? So, according to Boas, he was transferred from room to room in a total of 3 rooms in the ship. Whenever he made it to the last room, they left him alone for about 30 minutes. And that's when another humanoid came in. The first female humanoid he saw. The first couple of beings, humanoids, that he was subdued by were all male. This one he saw in the third room was a female. And that's when, according to Boas, they had sexual intercourse. And somehow they communicated with each other, and they let him know that they were going to bring up their child in their home planet, not on Earth. I don't know, man. It's believable to me for many different reasons, and I'd have to look up her name, but Andrew has more information as far as the video we both have seen of the lady who also claims that she had sexual intercourse. Well, what was the guy's name that made the videos?
It was Ben Hansen. He's an ex-FBI agent who turned night. What do you call it? Investigates the unexplained. He had the show on a Discovery Plus called UFO Witness. And he visited this one lady who said she's had like 9 alien babies. And they've come back and taken the babies before she could give birth, and she's actually met one of her half-breed children on one of her subsequent visits. So
yeah, that's how I know that we have seen the same report, because one of the things I was doing yesterday was going video after video trying to find the right one to start off with, and it started off really weird, like sexual intercourses and half breeds and all kinds of stuff, and that's where I came across her video. And yeah, according to her, she was abducted for sexual, whatever you want to call it, pleasure, whatever way you want to put it, at least 10 times. So there's at least 10 half-breeds of hers out there. And one of the last times they abducted her, like Andrew said, she got to meet one of her half-breed children. And even though she said that she had more alien features than human, it did look like her. And that she felt bad for her not being able to take care of her half-breed kid. And the reason she felt that way is because of these interactions and these abductions, she's never been able to have a real kid. Because even though So part of the story with her was after she was impregnated, 2 months in, the fetus would just disappear. And it's like she was never pregnant at all. But whenever she went to about at least 3 or 4 different gynecologists, and all of them said that she had developed a cyst that has happened to many other women in the past, that only happens when you have been pregnant before, but yet she hasn't been able to have a kid. No, Zach, they didn't technically take her in her sleep. The way they took her was coming into her house at night. She was fully awake, but paralyzed by an injection that they would release from their hand. That would fully paralyze her to where she can see, but she couldn't speak. She couldn't move, and obviously couldn't communicate in any way.
I found her name.
Okay.
It's Geraldine Orozco.
Yes. I was trying to find her name, but I was getting a different person, so I didn't want to say that name because it wasn't the one I'd seen. But yes, it's
Her
Geraldine
story-
Orozco.
Her story's on that show I was talking about called UFO Witness. It's episode 8 of season 1, the last episode of season 1. It's her story. It's called The Hybrid Secret.
Yeah.
So is that on Max?
Yes, it should be on Max.
Okay.
Well, now I have something new to watch on Max.
But he did 2 whole seasons of this show, and there's all different kinds of alien stuff going on. But this was the one that caught my eye when she said, "Yeah, I've had like 7 or 8 children. I've met one of them when she was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
She looked enough like me that I believed it, but it had some alien features."
And this is the kind of thing, which is what I was bringing up with Betty and Barney Hill, is why would someone put themselves in that position to be ridiculed and made fun of in the public if they weren't telling a true story, you know? I wouldn't say something like that if it wasn't real. Why make up a story? So yeah, to me, anybody who comes forward with hearing their stories out and making my own assumptions from that, 9 times out of 10, I would probably believe them, because, like I said, who would want to put themselves in that position? But then there's guys like, I have to get his name again. Hold on, I went to a different page. Okay. So while looking for the perfect video to start it out with, I came across one that I was going to go with first. But then I dove a little bit deeper. Stan Romanek is the guy's name. Have you heard his name before, Andrew?
No. Just
Okay.
sounds. This is the guy you were telling me about. Just sounds perfect for the guy. His
Yeah.
name-
So Stan Romanek supposedly was abducted, but a couple of weeks before he was abducted, and this is what made it most believable to me. A couple of weeks before he was abducted, he had a appointment where it said that he was going to have surgery on his right ankle or his right knee because he had damaged it to the point of needing surgery. And after his abduction, he went to get checked out by doctors again because he had some lesions that had shut up on his right. Whenever they did the tests on him, even the doctor said you don't need surgery anymore. Somehow whatever injury you had has miraculously healed itself. But yet he had what looked like, and this is what made it more credible to me as well. Have you seen pictures from some abductions, Andrew, where they have like 3 dots in a line, where supposedly they have had something done to them?
Yes.
That's what he had. That's what he had on his right leg. And I brought this up for another reason, because this is a story that I told you both about that party where supposedly an alien came down and spent some time at the party. You remember me telling you about this, Johnny?
Yeah.
Where one of the guys had stayed away because there was a big crowd around the alien.
Uh-huh.
But near the end of the night, he had to go close and take a look himself before the alien went away. And he had to get up real close because he was legally blind.
Mhm.
And after meeting with the alien and talking with him, he went to his room and he just fell asleep. I don't know how you can fall asleep after meeting an alien and spending some time face to face with him. But whenever he woke up the following morning, perfect vision. I've heard many different stories. This is just one of the ones that I have told you guys, but I have heard many different accounts. And that's why this one with Stan Romanek made it so believable to me at first, because how does your knee heal up from going to needing surgery to being fully healed? And there's even family members and friends that have said, yes, we remember him needing surgery and going to appointments because he was needing surgery for his knee. And now he's just miraculously healed. But the reason I'm singling him out is because they did investigate him, and it did come out that he was a con man, that he was falsifying what he was saying, and that he was also a pedophile. The U.S. government found a bunch of child pornography on his computer, and he ended up serving 3 years in jail for it. Was released, still on the sex offenders list, but he's back in jail right now for other child pornography shit. So that kind of discredits him a little bit. But then there's and I ended up on Reddit when I investigated this guy. And Reddit is just a shitstorm of information. Some people seem to believe the story. Other people think that the government put child pornography on his computer because his story was so credible, and There's interviews with him on YouTube. There's so many videos of him that people think the government planted all that child pornography on his computer to put him away.
If that's the case, then the government needs to be investigated, because what are they doing with child porn?
Exactly. What? I don't know exactly what to think of it, because the government has done some pretty shady shit. And the fact that they've hidden information as far as alien ships being recovered, bodies being recovered, like forever denying Area 51 until just recently. The case in Brazil that we did the live stream on, where supposedly they showed up and took everything they had, bodies, ships.
And now you have these retired agents that have come out and said that the government's known about UFOs for years and have been hiding the evidence of capture that they've made.
Yeah, it's like Zach just said in chat. They can access our computers anytime. If this is what happened with Stan Romanek, it is very possible that the government could have gone in there and planted that stuff to put them away, like I said. So if anybody here from the government is watching us right now for some fucking reason, I just want to let you know that we don't mean any harm. This is just something we are interested in. And with everything that's been coming out recently, of course we're going to talk about it. And that's why we are here. Because we want to know the truth. And there's been stories like Betty and Barney Hill back from the 50s and 60s that are very believable. So Zach just said, I'm not in the system, I'm safe. Look here, man. I have a VPN. I shouldn't even say that shit. Fuck, why did I just say it?
Yeah.
No, I'm not using a VPN right now. I'm not in Canada or wherever my location is set to. Fuck it, I already said it. Who cares? If they come after me, they come after me. But yeah, there's certain things that I have experienced that I don't say for the reason that I just don't want people to look at me any weirder than they already do. And that's a conversation for another day, because it would just take forever to bring up all those details. So the one thing I want to ask y'all before we wrap up here, me personally have not experienced anything extraterrestrial in any way, but I can't help but drive into work at 3:30 in the morning, just be looking up at the sky because it's still dark and wondering, are those really just stars, or am I looking at something else? You know?
Well, because of my vision, I've never been able to see stars in the sky. Like if it's a clear night, I still can't see stars. So I don't have that problem.
Dude, we have to get you a high-powered telescope.
But I do always wonder if there are planets out there that are similar to Earth, like a parallel universe, but obviously different beings that live just like we do.
Yeah.
If not better.
And that's why I'm going to go back up in chat real quick because Zach brought it up earlier. And he said, I don't know, but I have heard there are 9 different species of aliens. So I guess their basic description could be valid. Yeah, a basic description is valid, but there have the most common one is the grays. We all know about the grays.
Yeah, there was that recent incident in Las Vegas that they even had a supposed ring footage of one of the grays at someone's doorstep.
Yeah, and I'm bookmarked this story, and I meant to read it because it caught my attention. But supposedly there is another family who witnessed an event just like the one that happened in Vegas not too long ago. And supposedly the family is missing. Nobody can find them. So it's something I'm going to dive into. We never know what is truly happening out there.
So this possibly may have been an actual abduction, but they were never returned.
Yeah. Yeah. It might have been. Because I could get on, I could show you so many of the videos that I watched yesterday. One of the ones that I watched, the person that was abducted, when he was put in the room, he was in complete darkness, was afraid for what was going to happen. So just to see if there was anybody else in there with him, he called out, and 2 different people responded to him. So there was 2 other people in the room with him, and the lady that was in there said she had just been abducted like he had. But the third person, another guy, said that he had been there for a while. That he was not necessarily held captive, but was more like gaining their trust and being looked at as an ally instead of someone they could probe or whatever they were doing with them. But what this guy said was he had the privilege of actually wearing clothes. That's how much he had gained their confidence, because the 2 that were just abducted were completely naked. And that seems to be a common factor in a lot of these stories, is whenever they wake up in the ship, they're on a hard metal slab, completely naked, just ready to be examined or whatever they do. Anal probe, and just like Zach just said, you stay away from my sacred hole. Yeah, man. There's a lot of different things that we could talk about and dive into.
So
But go ahead.
So something else I wanted to bring up, and I had talked to you about this before. What do you think about what some people are now saying is that there aren't such thing as aliens, that UFOs that we see in the sky are actually time travelers from the future?
Right.
And I do remember recently for some reason these come up on my TikTok a lot. I sent you a video of this guy from, it was 1956. He was in Kiev, Ukraine, which seems very topical to me anyway, because what's going on now. But he he loved to take pictures. He was outdoors with his camera, and he saw these lights in the sky, and he went to go take a picture of the lights. And as soon as the flash hit, he disappeared. Like he went into like some portal, and he ended up. He was still in Kiev, Ukraine, but it was now 2006, and that people witnessed seeing him. He was wearing the period clothes, and like people even talked to him, and he said that, asking what year it was, and he was saying that he was from 1956, and in reality, in 1956, he was only gone. He actually went missing from Ukraine in 1956, and but he returned a couple years later. But what was interesting also to me about this video I saw is that they also showed a picture that was on that camera. He left his camera behind in 2006. On the camera was a picture of him. He had apparently gone further into the future. It was him in Kiev, Ukraine, 2050. And I want to believe this because looking at the picture, it gives me hope for the future, because it showed him like on a waterfront. The water was behind him, but beyond the water was the skyline of Kiev. And I I've never I haven't seen that many pictures of Kiev, but I don't think they have a skyline right now. But the skyline had like huge skyscrapers and buildings, so it says to me that Ukraine's gonna win the war over Russia, and they're gonna rebuild, and they're gonna thrive, be like a huge European like major city in the future.
Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily know if Ukraine has that sort of a skyline right now, like the one you mentioned.
Yeah,
I know Russia for sure does.
Yeah,
because I just saw a video a couple of days ago, again on TikTok. The curation of my videos, where a drone from the Ukraine hit certain places in Russia, and one of them looked very much like a downtown district. Skyscrapers, clubs, businesses, the whole thing. You
Yeah.
know, it's like New York in Russia is
Right.
what it looked like. So, yeah. But going back to what you initially asked about time travel, I do believe it's possible.
Yeah, like we don't have the technology right now, but in the future they have the technology to come back.
I do believe that eventually we're going to get there. We are too smart for our own good. So I do think it's going to happen. I do believe in time travel. Or it could be what Zach also brought up. He said he never got into time travel, but he does believe in alternate timelines.
Yes.
Somewhere there's a timeline where the Wrestleloss podcast still exists, but Andrew is a Mexican. Johnny is still Hispanic, and I'm a white, legally blind guy. I don't know.
and also in this alternate universe, we have 5,000 subscribers, and
yeah, we're banking.
We're the most popular channel on Twitch.
Yeah, we're working with Wrestle Talk. And
Yeah.
Sean Ross Sapp is our best friend. And yeah, we're at all the major pay-per-views and shit, just hanging out with everybody. But yes, I do believe in alternate timelines as well. because I've also read and seen many videos where people have went into a deep sleep but yet felt so awake and living a different version of their life, and then they go back to sleep, and then they go back to their mediocre life that they used to have, or their real life, let's say. I don't know, man. Alternate timelines I do believe in, but
Yes.
some of these stories that come out, I don't know whether you just had a really realistic dream, or if it truly was an alternate timeline that you somehow crossed paths and ended up over there. But yeah, I do believe in that as well. And that's something that we could dive into deeper in the future. I'm going to add it to the list of things we can discuss. And it's weird that you said that, Zach, because I've also had something like that happen. So I'm gonna bring it up to you guys and see if anything like this has happened to you. He said he's dreamed of something happening, and then it happens a few weeks later. I don't know if y'all have ever been in a situation like that.
I don't think so. But all through my life, there have been instances where I feel like I'm having deja vu, like I'm doing something somewhere that I feel like I've done it before.
Yeah. So one of the ones I had was I dreamed of myself having a friend named Maria. Not any of the Marias that you know, Juan, because we know way too many Marias.
Yes.
most of them come from work. But, yeah. And so in my dream, I met this Maria. She had a kid, and we were just like best of friends, and we would just hang out, and ended up having a relationship that lasted quite a while in the dream, but obviously and nothing ended up happening that was that serious in the end. And not even a year later, I met this Maria through another friend of mine from back in the day at school. Had a kid, same age, uh, a boy, and he was a boy in the dream. And yeah, we just ended up becoming friends, and having a relationship later on. And it seemed too real, and it seemed like I'd been through it before, but it was that dream, man. So yeah, I do believe in dreams happening, and they might be a premonition of things to come. There's many different things we could talk about, but yeah, with your time travel, with the time travel theory that's out there, that's a possibility of a certain form of alien. Like Zach said, he knows like about 9 different ones that he has heard about. That could technically be an alien.
Yeah.
It's just evolution. We're not always going to look like this. Like, we've evolved through the thousands of years into what we are now.
Like there was an old episode of South Park where there was somehow this portal that was created where people from the future were coming to work uh, because in their time like the money was so devalued that they couldn't they couldn't work to support their family, so they came back to this time to get jobs, and they were working for pennies an hour, but pennies an hour to them would be like a lot of money, and they were taking other people's jobs, and but they were saying that these people from the future, that they were so advanced that they were a mix of all races, and that their new language was just a combination of all the languages put together.
Yeah.
That's where the whole they took your job thing came from,
Yeah.
from South Park.
I mean, you see it now where people do like what's it called? 21andMe?
23.
Whatever it is.
Chromosomes.
No, it's a number.
Chromosomes.
23.
But,
It's 23.
Yeah, it's chromosomes.
I don't know that number, man. I've done it before. But people have done it, and it shows that, like, hey, you've got Hispanic in you, you've got whatever different type of race in you, you got 1% black, and
like I mentioned, my parents did that too.
Yeah, you're just a mix of everything. So we're getting there. We're getting to the point where we're no longer just one race. We're a mix of different types of races. So yeah, anything is possible. Yeah. So Zach just said Rob Dyrdek is 1/16 ginger. Yeah, I remember him saying that. But yeah, man, just like that is possible. Alien abductions are possible, and we just need to finally get all that information out that the government is hiding, and they're working on releasing all of that. So if y'all are listening, because I know y'all are, just let that shit out. We already need to know. So yeah, hopefully we never find ourselves in a situation where we are abducted or stuff like that. But if it does happen, even though I'm afraid of heights and all that shit, I'll enjoy the ride. Just please just use lube.
Just leave my ass alone.
I'm not even gonna rule that out, dude. Just please use lube. This is all I ask.
Yeah.
Make it as easy as you can on us. So, any last comments before we wrap up, guys?
No.
Drew?
No, not really.
All right. Well, looks like this is going to be it for this week. We're going to have to discuss what the next one is going to be, but now we have a couple more on the list. Time travel, alternate realities. We still have Bigfoot, 9/11. There's a lot of different topics that we want to touch up on. So we're going to discuss it, and we're going to come at y'all next month with another very interesting topic and conversation.
Actually, we already know when we're going to do the 9/11 one.
Well, yeah, the 9/11 one will be around 9/11.
On Monday, 9/11.
Yeah, since that's my birthday anyway, so okay, we might as well revisit my trauma of 2001 and
no one celebrating your birthday.
Yeah, when nobody knew why we were together, but we figured it out. Like, hey, why is there a birthday cake here? Like, fuck it. We figured it out. So, hope everybody has a good week and enjoy Monday Night Raw if possible. We'll see how good that one ends up being tonight. And we will come at you on next weekend with all our thoughts on that and our watch along.
Yeah,
because we will be watching along SummerSlam. So until then, enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to y'all later.
See you next week.
Check you later.